Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in. Today I'm going to be picking up on contributing to Drupal Rector from last week, or I think Wednesday is when I kicked this off. Sorry, a few days ago. It has been a long week. So a little bit of backstory. Drupal Rec, for those who did not tune in a few days ago, Drupal Rector is an extension for the Rector PHP project. And what Rector does is it will automate upgrading of legacy code. So there's various rules that it has that allows you to rewrite code. So if there's deprecated code or broken code, you can write code to fix that code. I'll show a quick example of that inside the Drupal Rector. So in one example here, this Drupal real path. So the deprecated function name was Drupal real path, and it was replaced with a service name and a call to that service. So what these rules will do is this rule definition is for a user interface. Somewhere else it shows how to replace the code completely. But in the example, if we had path equals Drupal real path, afterwards it would be refactored or rectored to this code here, where it would statically call the Drupal container or the static Drupal class, get the service file system, and call the real path method from the service. So to catch up, on Wednesday I worked on getting the Drupal Rector extension upgraded from Rector 0.7, which was released in July 2020 or June 2020, up to 0.10, which was released just about a week ago. We were able to take work added by Thomas, who is the maintainer for Rector. His initial work got to 0.8, but we had to jump up 2 more minor versions. And everything seemed to be working, except we are getting a test failure. And the test failure is showing that nothing is working, which is a really big bummer. It shows here this diff output is expecting it to say format equals date time interface, date storage format, but instead we're getting the legacy code. And I'm not sure why the test broke. And the test run behat and not PHP unit. So it's a bit hard to debug it locally. In the README for this project, let me get to that. So there is an automated testing, but the setup expects you to have a Drupal Rector in I would say like a sibling directory, and then you would have web core, web index. So I mean, maybe I could set it up in here and run the behat test, but honestly, the behat tests, if I can find them inside features, if we looked at the Rector's example, it says when I run Rector, the test folder, it's actually just executing Rector in the backend and copying the code. So it can be kind of hard to rerun. So what I'm thinking is we need to look at how Rector runs PHP unit tests and start contributing some PHP unit tests to figure this out. Specifically because I don't know how I could quickly run this and debug it with the current test suite. And the code does not set up that capability to have a Drupal core fixture. Maybe we could add that and we could debug it. I think I'll try that first instead of going all developer and saying like, well, it's not how I normally do things, so I'm going to rewrite it. Let's see if we can just get the test to run locally so I can debug this. So I have my branch. Oh, what is this? I want to see what error. Oh, from Symfony import, we'll close that. So we need to have this example set up where given the sysassume this repository is installed as a local composer package. This is necessary because we need full Drupal site to run the Rector tests. So I wonder if we could install the Drupal site like alongside of here. But I guess maybe not, because if we look at the workflow, it installs the Rector project as a dependency inside the Drupal site. So I don't think we have a way of running the test locally very well. So I am just going to go and look at how Rector does its PHP unit tests, and we're going to leverage that. So to start, let's go to the Rector repository, and I'm going to inspect its composer.json to see what PHP unit.xml, what PHP unit it uses, so we can match that. So if I were to go to require dev, we can look at, so it's using 9.5. So if we just do, I believe that's the latest. So if we did composer require dev PHP unit, that's going to be required. And we'll just start there. So we have that. Now we'll want to create, I believe if we run vendor bin PHP unit, we can do generate configuration. And it defaults to our autoloader. The test directory, we don't have this directory yet, but we will end up creating it. So we'll say it's in tests. The source directory is source. That is correct. We'll create the cache directory. Here we go. And one thing, if for newer versions of PHP unit, it does generate this .phpunit.cache directory. I actually didn't know it was a directory. I always thought it was just like a file. I never looked at it much. We have to make sure we add it to our git ignore. And we'll go here. For anyone who's curious, the reason why I added the /, it's out of habit, but this says in the root directory. So if I remove the /, it would exclude .phpunit.cache from any of the subdirectories. But by prefixing it with the /, it means the root file. So that's why, here it says /vendor. This ensures that it doesn't, this way, if you did, so for an example, like if I remove the / here for composer.lock, it includes this .lock, but if there was a .lock file, just quick show an example. So here, doesn't show it ignored actually, but it helps scope. So by going and changing this here, oh, actually it did, great. So you can see when I have it as just composer.lock, you might be able to see with the stream, I'm not sure, but this is kind of grayed out, or it's lighter. Now, if I put back the / and hit save, see that it now turned red? That means it is now unignored because it's been scoped to the root of the directory. So I'm going to delete that because I don't want to actually commit it. So that's a neat little Git trick that some folks may not know, and why if you see this /, it's like, why? Okay, so back onto the track with PHP unit. We're going to create our test directory. One thing that I usually like to add also is a dev autoload namespace. I'm curious if Rector does as well. Let's look at autoload. They do use autoload dev. Awesome. So you'll see that, autoloading involves declaring a PSR4 namespace, which PSR4 is, it's the PHP standards recommendations. That's what PSR stands for. There's all these numbers. PSR2 isn't listed. Oh, deprecated code styling. I did not know this, that the code styling guide of PSR2 is deprecated. That's new. Oh, extended coding style guide, PSR13. Today I learned. But 4 is the autoloading standard. And this explains it, but basically it just says, here's what your namespaces should look like and how you should define them and how they should be loaded. There's an alternative of PSR0 that some use, and this is where you might see some libraries that have a lib directory and different naming. That was PSR0, and then we have PSR4. Most projects use 4. If you are curious, it's phpfig.org/PSR. I'm going to put that in the chat for anyone who did not know about that or is curious to read some more. Like I'm excited to see the fact that, you know, HTTP client has a standards recommendation, event dispatcher, which this is now being leveraged in Symfony, simple cache. These just mean that regardless if you use Symfony, Net, Laravel, others, you should be interoperable. They should be using the same standards. So we're going to go ahead and also define our own dev namespacing. So if you're using PHP Storm and VS Code, both actually autocomplete this. I believe it's auto-completed based off of the JSON schema integration that are in the IDEs, in the editors. So it's able to determine this off of the known schema. So like if I hold down Command and I click on this, it's actually loading the known schema of the JSON. And this validates it, which is really interesting. So it knows in here some of the values. So it kind of strictly types your JSON file, which is great when you use JSON for configuration. And fun tip, you can use JSON schema with your YAML files. It will, VS Code and PHP Storm will use JSON schema to validate YAML. So I'm curious how they do their tests. So they just do Rector tests. So we'll do the same. So we're going to say Drupal Rector / tests. There's 2 backslashes to escape the code, but since we're in double quotes, we need to make sure we escape characters, because otherwise you would use, you use \s to say yes, it's, or \single apostrophe to say that it is an apostrophe. And we're going to say this is the test directory. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put it inside test source, because one habit I have is I will have my test directory, but I also have a directory called fixtures. And the fixtures are things that are used in tests, such as the Rector examples and Rector examples updated. These would live under fixtures. Typically, when we work in things, if you work with Drupal inside various modules, you'll see the structure of test, source, and underneath source is each test suite values, and fixtures has database fixtures to be imported. All right, so we have this. I'm going to look at one of their tests to see, well, they've got a few things going on here. I want to look at their test class base. So they've got Bootstrap. I wonder if we'll need to have this PHP stan stub loader. We'll find out. We'll kind of take it as we go. We didn't use a custom bootstrap.php. We are just having it load the autoloader. An alternative is to, point it to a bootstrap.php file. I'm going to add this to Git. But as you'll see here, they not only include the autoloader, but they ensure to silence deprecations. That's actually a pretty smart idea. Disable garbage collection for performance boosting. Another really good idea. And then they load the stubs. So let's see where their tests are for util. All right, I want to they test their rules. I'm going to look back at their, so they have test suites. They have test, rules test, package test. Okay, so they have things organized a bit, not differently, but different folders. So rules test, great. This is where we're going to see how we can copy how they run PHP unit tests to run our own. Because the benefit of running it this way is I can run it in PHP Storm with Xdebug and be able to determine why this doesn't seem to be working so well. So I guess let's just pick, we're going to pick, let's just naming. Let's go for naming. Property naming test, abstract kernel test. Maybe we can find abstract kernel test case. Let's try to, so again, sorry, I know I'm trying to make sure I call out keyboard shortcuts as I use them. So double tapping shift will open like a file browser, and you can paste in the class to look it up. So kernel container, kernel by hash. But this seems, we don't want kernel. That feels like something for testing Symfony classes. Or Rector has an HTTP kernel built into it, so that's why that is there. So I guess I'm gonna just have to dive into one. And so here they have it where they have a fixture. And if you're curious about this, these 3 dots, this is a common pattern. You might see it a lot in YAML, but the idea is to specify this is like a file break. So treat this half as one file, treat this other half as a second file. And as you'll see, I'm assuming this is the before and that's the after. So I'm just gonna okay, abstract Rector test case. Great, that feels a little bit more in line with what we're looking for. So let's just go ahead and write a test. We're gonna write a test against, let's look at a rule. Let's find a nice, somewhat easy rule to go by. Here we go. This seems pretty straightforward. Date, time zone storage, time zone Rector. Before, there is a global constant called datetime storage time zone, and it was refactored into the datetime interface with the storage time zone constant. So we're going to write a test for this, and what I'll do is I'm going to right click. I'm going to do new PHP test. I'm going to do PHP unit, but actually first I'm going to open my settings with command comma and go to languages. I'm going to go to PHP. I'm going to go to testing frameworks, and I'm going to make sure I set up PHP unit first. So path to script, sorry, one second. So composer autoloader. So I'm going to go into my vendor directory. I'm going to right click on autoload.php. I'm going to click copy path and do the absolute path. We'll go back into PHP to test frameworks and paste that in. I'm going to click the little refresh. So it determined that I have 9.5.4 running. And I'm going to copy this, paste it into there, and grab and say it is the PHP unit.xml. So it's able to determine my test routes. It sees that my directory is tests. If we were in the Rector repository with this running, it would show test. It would show rules -tests because it reads the XML file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do command N, I'm going to start typing PHP, and it will filter out the values. I'm going to click on PHP test and PHP unit test. So what this lets me do is I can start typing the class name. It already popped up, but we'll do date, time, storage, time zone Rector. And if I double click on that, it's going to determine the original file path, and it creates the test class name, which is the class with test appended to it, the directory, the namespace, and it would let me even specify methods in that to test. And I can click show inherited methods, and it's not, oh, there we go. Resizing it kind of shows things a bit more. But if I click, I'm able to select different test members that I want to run against. So in this case, I want to test it's going to test the get rule definition and refactor. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to click add. So I'm going to start. It doesn't annotate your test. So in here, we want to say covers default class, date, time zone, storage, time zone rector. And in here, I'm going to change that. We'll say at covers, and we're going to say that it covers the get rule definition. And I'm kind of curious. So test do file info, yield files from directory. This might have been a bad idea to auto-generate these, but I wanted to showcase that feature at least. For folks who are new to writing tests and didn't know about some of the features that PHP Storm has built into it. So we want to extend the abstract rector test case, abstract rector test case. It's abstract, but what do I need to run? So provide config file path. Okay, so that needs to be done. Must be it's weird. It says must be implemented, but normally you would do you would say it's an abstract. Yes, I want to edit it so I can show. You know, typically you have abstract like this, and then it will throw an error that needs to be implemented, but it's kind of like a silent thing going here. So we're going to actually just delete these generated ones, and we're going to provide config file path. So this goes to config configured rule. Let's look at what that involves. Okay, so it lets you do on-demand configuration. So I wonder if, I'm curious where this runs. So smart file info, config file path. All right, you can't just, I was hoping we could just do like a closure, but we will, let's see, what are those, this name? Configured rule. So I see now why every rule had its own folder. So what I'm going to do is in fixtures, I'm going to create a directory called config. Oh shoot, and I just realized it created the namespace to match up here. So Rector deprecation to here. So we're going to create a new config file called date, time, storage, time zone, rule.php. And we'll copy some of this code as well. And we're going to set the config to be the date, time, storage, time zone rector. I'm hitting Option Enter to trigger the little light bulb here, which pops open this menu to simplify the fully qualified name. And we'll add this. So now in this file here, we're going to do the magic constant of underscore underscore dir underscore underscore. So that way it knows like the current working directory. And now we will go to fixtures, config, and we're going to call it date time storage rule. Provide data. So it's test. Okay, so here it has yield files from directory, fixture, and then do test file info, smart file info. So I'm wondering if that smart file info is something that knows how to read the dash dash. So let's look at that. Smart file info. I'm just curious to look at Nope, I have no idea. All right, so we will, I guess we'll create a file to match and do this as well. So I'm going to copy this code and paste it into here. And it's complaining because I don't have these in my namespace. So let's see. So I'm going to move config to be inside of tests. So that way fixtures can be just actual fixtures. So we're going to do date time storage yield files from directory. I want to see, instead of having to go back and forth, I'm going to open this file in PHP Storm. And it doesn't want to load it. So let's go to Rector. Oh, because the tests are excluded in the package when it gets downloaded. So let's go to the yield files from directory. Yield files from directory. I wonder if there's a matching yield directory with relative path name, yield directory, static fixture finder. I guess we're just gonna have to make a folder. So I'm worrying too much about it. So we'll make a new folder, new directory, date time, storage, time zone. And in this example, let's go back. They have fixture and they just had fixture.php.inc. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do fixture.php.inc. We'll add it. Now let's look at the Rector examples. Date time storage time zone. So we have it here. So I'm going to copy it and I'm going to mimic their fixture where they close the file. They use the 5. I'm just going to copy it. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dashes. And we're going to delete the comments because we don't need the comments in here. And we'll copy this and we'll paste it again, but it should be date, time, let's go back to our rule. And this is probably going to fail without having Drupal available, but I want to just see how far we can get without having to set up Drupal as a dev dependency, because I do that for PHP stand Drupal and Drupal check. Like, it works. It's not impossible, but we'll see what we can do. So I guess in here, it adds a use statement. So we'll add the use statement here and we'll clean up these, clean up these references, do a copy paste. All right, so let's go again back to fixtures. And we'll point it to the date time storage time zone fixture. It's probably going to be smarter just to mimic the way that Rector sets things up, and each test has its own directory. So I guess the next thing to do is we're just going to hit run. We're going to see what happens and see if it explodes or not. So configuration failed asserting that string matches the expected, the actual. So it looks like it worked. it just didn't shorten to a use statement. So let's update that fixture. I'm going to cut that. And we'll rerun it. What is the difference here? I'm having, oh wait, is it because there's a, is that a new line that's being appended for some reason? Oh, no, no, no. I have something duplicated in there. That's why. I have daytime interface duplicated. If we run, test does not have a covers annotation, but is expected to have one. I guess that's because I have covers default class in here. And we're going to say that this would then covers, it technically covers the refactor method, which is inside of this base class, I believe. Yep, factor. So the test passed. That's great. Like, we proved that it refactored, but in the hat test, nothing worked in the GitHub workflow. So this is cool for writing unit tests of each rule, but this is great for writing a unit test of each rule, but I guess it's not good for like a full-on functional test to make sure it's running. So one thing I am going to do is I'm going to follow the Rector format where each one second. So I'm going to update this test to their pattern, and then I'm going to read the chat real quick. So yeah, so I did miss that the interface was twice. The behat is basically README needs an update. Yeah, the README does need an update here because it's not covered in this main workflow. It's covered in the, yeah, there's nothing in here. It's covered in this automated testing. So setup, you need to set up, for an example, run composer install. It's just not that easy to do, unfortunately. We'll try a few things. Yeah, it wants to be added as a local dependency. I've done some trickery like that in PHP stand Drupal, where in composer.json I have core dev as a dev dependency, and I've added the installer paths, and I actually install Drupal into test fixtures, and then my tests point at that and run a mock analyzer. So I think this will be the next step I take to try to run this so we can run an individual rule with Xdebug. So I'm going to quick just refactor this test, and we're going to make a new directory called date time zone, date time storage time zone, right? They just call it Rector. So they'll call that directory. And we're going to move the class into there. We'll click refactor. And date time storage time zone Rector. We'll fix the namespace. And what do they have? A config and directory config. We're going to drag our config into here. which they just named theirs configured rule in there. We'll just do the same thing. We're going to follow the same format. So I'm going to click on refactor, rename, configured rule, and we'll create the fixture directory, and again drag this into here. I'm going to delete that directory, and now we will go update these. So now oh, sorry, it's not fixture, it's just fixture. Why is this not? Oh, because I didn't put them into the right folder. Okay, so now if I look at my test, it should say fixture. I can delete this. So we've got fixture there and config. We have configured rule. Oh, yeah, why won't this? Rerun the test. Oh, that's going to error because it doesn't exist. So just play here. That's why I forgot the closing apostrophe. All right, the test passed. Great. We've kind of set up that we can add unit tests for all the tests. I'm going to open my commit and bar here. Say add PHP unit and initial test. I'm going to commit that because that's useful, but it's not exactly solving our current problem where it doesn't seem to be reading the updates to our configuration and running properly against a Drupal site. Because part of the changes were everything moved from YAML to PHP, and things just aren't cooperating. So let's look at the next step. I'm going to walk through what I do in some of the PHP stand Drupal tests real quick. So inside tests, we have fixtures, and inside Drupal, there's like the mock Drupal discovery here. And inside source, I have analyzer test base. And this mocks up running PHP stand against that test Drupal environment. And this is what I think is going to have to be done here. So that way we can so this helps test like the discovery and autoloading in kind of like an integration test. So it's not a pure unit test. It's a bit like of an integration test because there's so many things that can go wrong. So that's going to have to be the next step, which means learning a little bit more about how Rector runs. So I'm going to go into bin and then Rector. So what do they got going on here? So Autoloader, scoper autoload, command line. All right, I don't think I can do the same tricks. Or I can. We could try a few things. So what is this trying to find? If there's a vendor, scoped autoloader, load if exists. Okay. So I'm trying to just read through what this is doing. Autoload project autoloader file. Yep. Okay. So that loads the project autoloader. We don't need that. Autoload from command line. Autoload file. So Symfony style factory, we don't need that. This config resolver, we definitely do need. Provide. So arg input, this config resolver, resolve from input with fallback to Rector PHP. Resolve from input. Get option name is config. So this reads from the argv in the server. And then it does Rector container factory and then creates the container from the Bootstrap config. So maybe I think we can skip this resolver because we know where our files are located. Bootstrap configs, main config file info. Okay, we're gonna start writing a test for this. So tests. We've got source. We've got all these here. I'm just gonna create a new test like Drupal integration test. That's what we're gonna call this. And we're gonna just start hacking away at this and we're gonna see what happens. So we've got Drupal Rector in the test directory, we've got final class, Drupal integration test, extends test case. I don't believe Rector has any tests that match this kind of format. So there was the utils. There's some tests in here. But these tests here, Bootstrap, dependency injection. Yeah, none of this actually runs it against encode. So we're gonna wing it here. We're gonna import the PHP unit test. And we're gonna do public function test integration. And let's start looking through this. I'm going to close that back again. So we know we need to have some of these run. So we're going to do a try. Actually, we don't want to try catch. We want exceptions to cause an error. So we need to recreate Bootstrap configs, and that's going to equal this provider, which the end result is this class. The end result is to get a Bootstrap configs with the main config file info and config file infos. And that is going to be this rector.php. And I honestly wonder if part of the problem is just that this import is broken, isn't working and discovering files properly. So we'll see. So I'm going to close that. Let's look at I want to look back at this a bit. So main config file info looks from resolve from input with fallback. Let's see, how do we, I don't remember, I don't even know how you set up Rector. To be honest, Drupal Rector. So scope and limitations, installation. So you're supposed to copy the configuration to your local. Okay. And that is how you're supposed to run it. Which rector.php is the same as this vendor. So we're going to, the main config file is main config file info, resolve from input, this create file info. So it's a new smart file info. So we will do, so equals new smart file info. And we're going to pass it the rector.php. We're going to have to make one just for our testing environment. Okay. So this is going to be a little interesting. We're going to see how well this goes. We know off the bat that this could be one of the reasons things are broken. Actually, I feel like, why is this calling? Like, this feels like it's got, maybe with the YAML file, this was, you know what? I feel like in YAML it needed the absolute path, but in this, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to actually detour quick back to the .8 example and find when this file was added. And I'm going to search for it. So this makes sense. Drupal 8, so it's there. What's this file name? This was just rector.php. I feel like this is the problem. So let's look at the previous diff. This resource was an absolute path because in YAML you couldn't have dynamic resolutions. So real quick, before I go down the rabbit hole of the test, we are going to, we're going to just fix all these directory calls and see if that fixes it. Now, I think it'd be great to run. So yeah, that workflow does have the steps for setting it up, which would just be a real big pain locally. Like, I would love it if we could run PHP unit tests to wrap everything. No, I realized that Streamlabs is now showing the chat, but there's no background on it. So that stinks. Sorry, everybody. I'm still figuring out the Twitch widgets. So it's there, but hard to read. I'm going to work on that for the next stream. So real quick, I'm going to commit these changes. As I'm going through, I'm holding Command D to review the diff. I believe if you right click on it, it says show diff, which shows the shortcut. So we'll see I dropped these path prefixes and fix, what is that called? What is it doing? The configuration, the fix importer. Quick, why does it show? Why don't they show the YAML file still? Yeah. Okay. So the doc root one is wrong. When you have a doc root, that one's incorrect. I wonder if we could get this to be more normalized. I think we could actually improve this. So we could use Webflow's Drupal Finder and make it so there's only one Rector file you need, and it dynamically determines if you have a doc root or web directory. So before I forget, because I'm a forgetful person, a new issue. Leverage, right? Is it Webflow? Yep. Leverage to discover Drupal and reduce number of config files to maintain. We could use package to determine where Drupal is located and not need. Oh, I don't want to copy they changed copy in PHP Storm, like the default, and I'm sure I can change it somewhere, but running Command C copies the file name and then like the local path. And it's like, that's neat in some cases, but I want just the file name. I don't want the path as well. I'm going to backtick these so they get formatted as code. So it's a little bit easier to read. It could dynamically determine, which lowers maintenance cost. All right, so new issue created. We'll tackle that another time. So I fixed, so this is one reason it's good to review all of your diffs, even if you're pretty confident, because this is to .php, but the doc root, like I noticed that this was still referencing the .yaml file, which it would have broken. And if there were no tests that went against the doc root, because I'm pretty sure that the default workflow of local package run uses Drupal recommended project, which has a web subdirectory, and basically only anybody that's on Acquia has a doc root file. or folder rather. So somebody could have been using this, been hosted on Acquia, or I think like some legacy Pantheon sites had it, because Pantheon, it wasn't configurable, but they had like the magical doc root folder. Some people could have hit a button and we could have shipped this and nobody known. So we're gonna do, why is this? Okay. Fix importer config paths. Let's push that. Yep, so we'll push everything. And I made sure to exclude that in progress test. I didn't click the checkbox. Let's go back here. I'm going to refresh the page. We have test run. I'm going to be really excited if that was it, because I couldn't find the configuration. I wish that this import not found and ignore errors. So ignore errors, import. We're not telling it to ignore any errors. I'm just curious why it didn't throw an error if the file wasn't found. And I feel like that's the problem that happened. It's really hard to know in this case. So we're going to go back to, okay, PHP stand analyzed. We're going to go to the local run and get back to figuring out how to test the integration here. I kind of went in a roundabout circle, so sorry about that. My brain just kind of, it bounces. So I apologize. I tried to be good about it on the streams and circle back and explain things. So if I do ever miss anything, let me know and I'll make sure to go back. Or if it's like, wait, why are we here? How did that happen? I'm gonna import that class again using the Option Enter key to trigger the little menu. The one thing we did, oh yeah, the config files info. So that was inside provide. And so if main config is not equal to null, set file infos, set aware from main config file infos is a merge. All right, so I guess we'll have to Rector config resolver. I guess maybe we will need to just use this after all. Private set aware config resolver. Maybe we can just back out of adding that. We'll say set aware config resolver equals that, and we'll copy, we'll paste that into there. And this provide, what did it do? It did set file infos. We're going to copy that. Now, what I'm doing is probably not the greatest idea, because if they upgrade their code and change their code, well, that means that if they change how this provide works, things will break. So, shoot, I have a different idea. So we have bootstrap configs equals rector configs provider solve. I have another idea. So I'm sorry, I'm thinking for a second. So we want it to be rector config resolver. Provide, import the class. The only problem is this argv input reads from the server and then it resolve from input, array fallback files. We have no way of easily providing the custom fallback files, so we need to inject into the where's the file at? Sorry. Oh, argv input. So we need to specify the value in argv, which I don't necessarily like polluting globals in a test. So let's see. What we could do is have a I want to look at how Drupal does this actually in one area. So if we go to Drupal, the renderer executes things in a render context, and it allows you to set scope and prevent modification of globals. And I just can't think off the top of my head the fancy way of doing it. So we're going to go to the render namespace. We're going to go to renderer. We're going to look for execute in render context. So this does return. Oh. So context. So result. Okay, so it does callable. Okay, so we're going to say, I'm just going to say callable equals static function. And we're going to return this and have callable invoked. So now what we'll do, so we're creating we're basically scoping any state changes here. At least that's my goal. So argv, how does it read from there? Resolve from, there's input, resolve from input. Option name is config. So get option value from input has parameter option, get parameter option. I don't know how we'll mock this, but I think if we just do that, and if we say the file name is the full path to Rector, we'll see what happens. I'm going to drop a breakpoint in there, but first let's see the results. Oh. The file does not exist. Oh shoot, that's because it does copy the file, so I'm wrong. File does not, that's okay. So it was working because it copies in the Rector file. You don't just reference it from inside the package. So I need to undo that commit because that didn't fix anything. Yep. Darn. So let me go back to this here and add back the vendor paths. All right. I guess I could have just done git revert on that one commit, but so that plan did not work. So I'm going to keep moving forward on trying to get this test to run. So I'm going to right click and do debug. So now I'm going to see if this pointed to our install file. So I hope this is the right way to define, strip the application name. All right, didn't account for that. So we're gonna go there. We input tokens, config, options. So I actually have no idea how this gets parsed out properly. So I guess we're gonna learn. So got that. Definition. Input definition. Set definition. Argument set option. Option names. C config. This has parameter options. This token. Oh, maybe I did do it right. Nope. For each value as values leading. Oh, so config equals, so if token, I see, that's what I did wrong. It's not an associative array, it's it should look like this. So let's rerun the debugger and go through all of that again. So that looks like it should be right. The definition again. Main config file info. It did find it. Then we got an exception. The file Drupal Rector config Drupal 8 Drupal all deprecations is not. Oh, because it's looking in the vendor. So one thing we're going to add into here is, I guess maybe we'll just create a test version of it. I'm going to say Rector PHP unit just to copy it, and in here we'll adjust this so it works in our PHP unit. Again, I want to clean it up, but I'm going to try to let's just get it to work and prove it works before getting too extreme on. So let's hit play. It didn't error. I'm going to run the debugger. So we got the Bootstrap configs and set config file infos. I don't smart file system, Rector container factory, the Bootstrap configs. I mean, I guess this means it's working and we can start trying to analyze things. So let's move to the next step. How does Rector move forward? So let's go back to the binary file. So it gets the container. And then does container get console application and then runs. And exit with that exit code. I guess what we need to see is what commands do you run now? Is it a single command application? No, there are multiple commands. the init command, and then there's process. Okay, so we need to replicate the process command. I'm just rereading all the docs because, like I said last time, despite working on PHP stand Drupal and everything, I have never used Rector actually. So the process command is what we want. So we're going to have to run the process command, and this does not look like we could easily mock it. So we're going to copy this line of code right here and do option return to import the class. And I wonder if there's run. So Symfony application run specific command. Executing the command. That's here. There's got to be a way to testing commands. So here we go. So we're going to get the application. Oh, we can find. That's it. So we want to do, what does this say? Command. So command equals application find. And in here, it loads commands for each commands there. Set default command. Let's just get the name. Configure. We're set name. I feel like I'm missing something here. Class to command. Okay, so it converts things. Okay, so it's just process. It's just process. So find the process command and command tester execute. Let's see. So we'll do the command tester. Let's just see what happens here. It goes new command tester. And we pass the command to it, and then we run command tester execute. Then we pass an input, which would be the path to the file. Correct. Like, let's look. Yeah, pass arguments. So the arguments would be the Rector examples. We'll do this. We'll just try this date time storage format. Execute, then output. That we'll just we're going to see what happens. So again, I know I've said a few times in previous streams, but I have a habit of doing stop equals null as like my breakpoint setter, because you can't set a breakpoint on an empty line of string, an empty line. So after something happens, I usually drop a break. I type stop equals null and drop a breakpoint because it's a non-destructive thing that you can do. You know, in the Drupal world, we're used to DPM, which prints output, but that's something that can break if you have the development module disabled. Or, in regular PHP, you might use var export, but you don't want that to land in production. So stop equals null is like the, if it gets committed, it's some noise, but it's a nice way to set a breakpoint at a point in time without adding code that might have repercussions. All right, I'm going to debug this test again. Let's see what happens. Directory web core was not found, which is expected because it doesn't exist. But I think that's pretty awesome because that means it's working. So let's take it to the next step. We're gonna go to the next step here. I'm just closing a few folders. So we're gonna do the same thing that I set up in PHP Stand Drupal. We're inside fixtures. We get the core. We get an installation of core. So I'm gonna copy a few things verbatim here. We're gonna start with just core recommended. I don't know if we need core dev. So in PHP Stand Drupal, we need core dev because it analyzed the tests and it requires having PHP unit available along with Mink and a few other things. So we're going to start light here, where we're going to take core recommended and we're going to add it to the required dev, which is somewhere in here. Here we go. ABC means it would go here. Keep it in alphabetical order. I don't think we need to have Drush. We do need composer installers, so that way things will get installed in the right area. We need to copy the installer paths, which goes into extra, and I don't believe this has an extra yet, so we will add it after here. For those who aren't familiar with composer installers, so it's basically, it's a community library that tells Composer where to install things. And it's not just used by Drupal, it's used by everybody. Civi CRM, if you have Civi CRM extensions, it tells it where to install it. Drupal, we've got a whole bunch of options that were added into there. Like Grav CMS, Joomla, Laravel, like Laravel libraries. It puts it into the right area, and like pretty sure even WordPress has something in here, like WordPress plugins, so it'll put in WP content plugins. For Drupal, the standard place is inside of your like web modules contrib, but in here we're telling it to install into test fixtures Drupal. So I'm going to go ahead and run composer update. I guess technically it's bad to run composer update because it's going to update everything. But since we're a library, we don't commit composer.lock. We always test against the latest dependencies. We're going to conflict because of Rector requires YAML 3.4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add -w is with all dependencies. So think of like composer update was installing the missing item. Oh shoot, it's still gonna have an error. One second, I'm gonna have to try to solve this because I was thinking that it was going to be a bit easier of a fix, but it's not. So Rector 10. So Drupal core requires Symfony 3.4. So it's conflicting on a Rector requirement and the Drupal core about Symfony dependency injection. So let's do composer y Symfony YAML. For behat, requires 4 or 5, and Drupal core requires 4.4. So why? Oh, is it because show? So I think it's because we have Symfony YAML 5 installed, but we could support 4.4. So why? This should work. The problem is it doesn't want to downgrade Symfony YAML. So Drupal, oh, because I support 8.8 or Drupal 9 in the code here, and if we look at, if we were to go back to 8.9.3, Symfony YAML is tagged at 3.4.41. And I bet if we look at Drupal core, if we go to the 8.9.13, it's still pegged there. So we can't add core as a dependency because it's going to conflict on the Symfony YAML version in 8.8. That's a bummer. I guess we could install it separately. I don't necessarily like that. I like it all being bundled in, because that way there's no additional steps. But I guess we might not have a choice here, because of Behat. I just want to see real quick, like on Behat. What about 3.7? So 3.7 allowed it, and our constraint is 3.6. So I'm just going to change this to 3.7.7. We're going to composer update and see what happens. So with 3.7, we can use YAML 3. 3.8 is what requires 4.4. And I'm going to use the -W to allow downgrades. And I think that should fix it. Otherwise, I'm just going to delete the lock file and the vendor directory and see what happens. Yeah. So let's do composer update and see if this will get a satisfied dependency tree. No. Ugh. Rector 10. Yeah, that's fine. Requires Symfony YAML 3.4. But what requires... Oh, it's because... Is it because Drupal core itself is conflicting on itself? I think so. How in the world did I get this to work in PHP stay in Drupal? I guess nothing had to depend. Like, what? Yeah, what in the world? Yeah, I'm not sure how I got any of this to work in PHP stay in Drupal. Because it's just not, it's not there. Well, shoot. Let's try removing the 9 real quick. And if that doesn't do it, then we're just going to have to make it where it's manually installed. And you can't run the test without it, which is exactly what happens right now, and that's not the end of the world. Yep. And it conflicts with Rector, which is expected. Let's run because of Symfony kernel. Okay, so this idea is dead in water. This is not that's not going to happen. So let's just revert that and remove that. We'll run composer update. But I have another idea that we can do. So I'm going to open my git ignore, and we're going to go to tests, fixtures, and we're going to add a Drupal command there. Okay, so we've got everything installed and fixed up, which is great. So let's see. I want to move this Rector config into config because it's for PHP unit. And I got to wait for PHP Storm to stop indexing. I'm going to close some of my tabs. Oh. I think that's the one like bummer is with PHP Storm, like you want to move a file and when it's indexing, you can't, but I get it because it tries to fix any resolved paths. I just wish you could say, nah, I don't need you to. Like, I know that it's okay to safely move this file. Let's go. So this, okay, so we're back. So this proves that the file paths are working, but this is just being a stinker. All right. So we're gonna move config into here. I'm gonna update the test to config. Jeez. No, not fixtures. We're gonna go to config and Rector PHP unit. And we're gonna change this to be we're gonna update all of this. Okay, so that's going to the right files now. I'm gonna update that to be fixture/web for all of these. Or actually, we're gonna do absolute because I just find that helps reduce bugs. Yep. There is an option for that. I thought you could only that change. I thought that checkbox for search for references is when you're moving the file, but it doesn't let you opt for that while it's indexing. That's the one bummer. While it's indexing, you can't opt for that. It just says nope, you can't move a file while we're indexing. So it doesn't happen often, but it's just there's a few times I'm like, I just wish I could skip that. So we've rechanged all this config, and I'm wondering if we should maybe just make a composer script that will install Drupal. But we're so let's just go to we're gonna do composer create project recommended project. We're going to we want 8.9. So we're gonna do it as 8.9 into tests fixtures Drupal. So I'm just making note of this. So we'll document it here. Assumes Drupal core, Drupal, what is it? Recommended project is at tests fixtures Drupal. So, okay, so make sure I know how to type, copy that. So we've now installed Drupal to here. And we're going to try running the test. Like, I really wish I could have had it be a dependency in composer.json so it automatically was added, but it's not the end of the world if we say, look, in order to run the test, in order to run the integration test, you must run this command. And with this, we can test 8 and 9 as part of the workflow. So we're going to go through and debug this again. I'm going to put a breakpoint up here and one down low just to make sure that the config loads properly again. And it's going to complain that it's indexing before it goes in. But the one nice part is now that we have these files here, the rules should, like in our tests, so if I go back in here, date time storage, not to there. Oh, but this will end up not saying, well, it might complain about this or that, but it should automatically, it should be able to determine these namespaces. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish indexing. I'm going to clear this annoying blinking error. So yeah, I was hoping to be farther today with this, but it's, I'm hoping to invest this time into having more robust tests. We now have a sample unit test, so that way all of the rules can have unit tests attached to them on top of the functional tests. And it seems like it's something fairly easy for anyone to contribute, right? You basically copy this, which would be great if we could find a way to simplify this even more. And then you provide the config, which, it's really straightforward. It's just a lot of boilerplate for writing these tests. All right, so I'm going to right click and click debug. What do you mean it's not available while updating indexes? It's okay. Now we go. So we've got our Bootstrap configs. We've got the container, maybe. I think this is where it broke before, is when it was trying to create the Bootstrap configs because it couldn't find Drupal. So the fact it took a little bit means that we have everything. Parameters, let's just curious in here. File load extensions, we've got everything. The autoload paths, that doesn't look right. I got typos in there. So I'm going to hit stop because we know it's going to fail. And yep, I forgot the trailing slash. So now if I do and it's doubly wrong because I forgot to put in the Drupal directory there. So now if I hold down command, these should all highlight and take me to the directories. Okay. Now let's rerun the debugger. And again, this is one reason I'm going through all of this, or I went through all this work to get PHP unit tests so I can run it with Xdebug so I can see what's going on and why it's not running. Right now, I have no idea why in the test it ran but says it didn't change anything. And it's really hard to know why without running it locally and being able to run Xdebug. So now we have the application, we have the command, the process command, we have the tester. We're going to execute and see what happens. Hopefully it doesn't explode. Hey, we've got, okay, it came back. The output was empty. So let's look at command tester. The stream output was empty. Inputs, parameters, process. Command maybe. Command process. I guess what would need to happen is debug inside of here. So we hit play. I'm going to look at my change list to see if it modified the file. It doesn't look like it did. So I want to go back into here. And the next step is to go into the process command and get down into the execution. So we're going to debug into that now. So I'm going to move my debugger to right there so we know when it hits this and are prepared for it to be executed. Let's go down the rabbit hole. So I'm going to hit play. All right, so now we're inside the command. Let's step over this configuration, paths. It didn't resolve any paths to inspect. So that's why it didn't do anything. This configuration. So I guess we need to stop in here. Real quick, I want to look at the command. So we are calling, we're doing it. We're process and we're passing the folder. Execute. The input is an array, which we already have the command name set. This run. All right, we'll debug it again to see. I'm actually going to remove this breakpoint because we know it's hitting the command. I'm going to jump into here. So input option. So dry run. These are all options. You know, I wonder if we should generate this output file so that way it doesn't modify in place. Source. Option source. Get argument. So let's look into here. Has argument. Arguments. Command source default. This arguments 0. So I guess, we need to actually pass it the name of source. So this expects, I went back to this file. So this does expect an associative array. So we'll re-debug it. Oops, didn't want to go into it. So I'm going to just step into this again, and we're going to go over. So this is what we need to make sure returns something. So this arguments name source. Great, that is what we wanted. So command line paths, we have it there. So if it's not equal to an empty array, it sets the paths. And we have the paths here again. And now it's going to do the autoloader. So if we're running the debug for cache. So now it's going to run on the paths. I'm just going to skip over it for now, as much as I really think it'd be cool to like step into it. Output format is console, output formatter. Shellcode. So output was empty. But it did modify the file and it did run against it, which is pretty neat, but that's not I guess what we need to do is maybe pass it as a dry run and assert the output, but it worked. So that's cool. We ran it against the file and it did the thing. But not that's still not helping, I guess, in the fact that the behat tests are failing. Which means that maybe it's just a setup in the GitHub workflow. Unfortunately. So what I want to do is look at we're going to pass dry run. So what's the first one? The first one is input. The second one is options. So I think that would just be dry run is true. And we're going to walk through it again, and we'll see if we can get some outputs that we can test. Yes. Yeah, we want to resolve the configuration from. So this dry run should be, no, it's false. Option dry run. Input options. It didn't pass the option. Right? Execute. Should be. So we step over. Options. Dry run is true. And thus options are this options decorated init output. Oh, so maybe options doesn't have to do with that. It needs to be put into here. So I'm going to press play. And that didn't. Oh, it should stop. Argument. The dry run argument does not exist. Okay, so why didn't it get processed into here? Oh. Shoot. Let's rerun. So input. Why is option 0? Let's go back into this execute and init output, but that's output. Options, an array of execution options, an array of command arguments and options. So input is an array of arguments and options. Let's go back to the Symfony command tester, because I am missing something here. As arguments, prefix the key with and 2 dashes. So I assumed incorrectly. So it actually checks that 2 dashes. So if I press play, we'll see input or options. I don't know. So we look at this input, we see options as dry run is true. So if we look at this configuration, it should say dry run is true. Let's back up out of it and see when it stops and if we get output at least that we can test from. We go to debugger. The output again is nothing. But it had a status code of 1. All right, this is a rabbit hole that's not getting us anywhere. Unfortunately. So the next step is we just need to figure out why this behat test is failing and not processing anything. So let's look back at this failure. Trying to move it into this setup is just not working as well as I thought it would. So let's see. There's so many errors. So in this case, yeah, it didn't. I don't know why it's not running against anything. So this is the local package functional test. So it sets up PHP. Oops. It downloads the latest Drupal core to the Drupal directory, and then it moves the Drupal directory into itself. I'm curious why it does that. And then it runs install Drupal directory into the current GitHub Actions directory. No testing for both forks and main repo. So like this makes sense. I do this in PHP stan, require @dev. Symlinking has issues for me sometimes, but that doesn't seem it. I'm just trying to grok this part. So it creates project in the .Drupal, but then moves it all out of that directory into the root directory. And then we go into there, we require this, we cd into it, we require, we copy, oops. So this copies the rector.php and it prepares the Rector examples by moving it into Web Modules Custom. Requires this. I feel like that should move into up here when we require core dev, but we'll just skip that. Run. So this installs dependencies into the local package and then runs behat. And we have the deprecation. Well, so the cd ... in every command is required because every step that's your working directory. So in a CI process, every command always resets to the main working directory. And then issues on Rector and Drupal compatibility. Yeah, I just hit those two. And what we can do, so I guess I'm going to take some of my learnings from my work with PHP stan Drupal and try to get this. I'm going to refactor a little bit so I can grok it some. So if I go to GitHub, workflows, PHP. So what we need to do is composer create project, cd Drupal. Is that what I have here? 1 second. Build integration. Here we go. So just to normalize a few things. No interaction. Oh, that looks like it copied more than I intended. No interaction, although I'm pretty sure that Composer determines this in a CI and you don't need that. And I'm just going to copy this whole line. So this will set up Drupal correctly. So it was at ~8. minimum stability dev, prefer stable true. We're going to add our workspace so that way it can be included. And we need core dev. So 8. And if it's 9, we're not there yet. So then require the local require. That's what this is doing here. Which right? Yeah. Actually, I thought that I updated. Oh, shoot. That was in. So PHP stand Drupal technically still has a bug in it. It's inside of Drupal check is when I fixed the require here. So I'm going to copy this. That means we can delete this line here. And we do cd into Drupal. And some of this indentation will try to normalize there. Okay. So this is installing, this is like a lot of the same things, but I'm just normalizing it to a few things that I know. Require core dev is what this was doing here, except without requiring core dev. So we're going to remove that. So Drupal core split into 2 packages. We have core recommended, which is the non-developer dependencies. And then we have core dev, which allows you to get all the developer dependencies used by Drupal core. So those extensions don't quite cover everything. And let's get Composer 2. So that way we have it be faster. All right, so we're doing that. Prepare Rector config files from the Drupal specific settings. So we're going to cd into Drupal, and we're going to copy rector.php to there, and we're going to cd into, we're going to go into there. Yeah, I guess we'll just cd into there. We're going to make the custom directory. We're going to copy it there. Then we're going to run composer install inside of the package. So that way we get behat, and then we're going to run behat. And that means this rector.php should still work just fine. I'm going to just commit this. Update local packages flow. Do a push. With this integration test right here, like we ran it and we were able to get, it updated the code. So I don't know what's going on here, and why it's breaking inside of GitHub Actions. And unfortunately, that can be the worst thing ever, is having to debug tests, especially when they have a very specific flow. So yeah, so when we ran this PHP unit test to Rector this date storage format example, we received the updated code. Now this command tester did not really, didn't help this input, didn't return any of the output. So, but when I removed dry run, it actually modified the file. So I want to see if there's, while this is running, I want to see if I can get this to return the exit code. So let's change some of these options. So we'll do decorated true and verbosity. What is it? Output interface debug. So we'll do output the question is my module cookbook still valid for Drupal 9? Pretty much. Some things may have changed. Some I tried to keep it up to date. So a lot of it is still relevant because the things that it covered didn't necessarily go away, but some things changed. I tried to keep it up to the second revision should be up to date with any deprecated code. Like I'm pretty sure version 1 talked about entity manager when that became entity type manager. And a lot of those things got deprecated early on, but I think for the most part, a lot of it is still relevant. I know that the module development for Drupal 9 book was updated to handle like the changes, but I know my cookbook should still be pretty relevant. Books are a labor of love, and I don't exactly have the time or motivation to create a new revision for that for Drupal 9. So feel free to check it out. It should still pretty much like when it like I know the section for creating an entity that hasn't changed. For writing plugins, that hasn't changed. Views, that hasn't changed. There might be a few tweaks along the way, but it's still pretty much a lot of it still stands. It doesn't cover some of the newer features like leveraging workspaces or content moderation because that was added, but that's not so much like the code stuff. All right, so let's see what's going on here. So this is that setup Drupal. It's seeding into it. I'm going to debug this again while we wait for that to run, because I am determined to figure out how to get this to work. So we can run tests via PHP unit. All right, so we got the command. We got the output. And the output is still nil. And that is just wild. Command tester, output, like, is it just like why? I know the process command generates some kind of output. Is it because we need to change the formatter, the output formatter? Output format this report. I guess we'll have to see. Inverse error code for CI and dry run. We'll have to see there. I want to check back in on this. That says it's taking 4 minutes. About this. Let's look at the raw logs aren't available yet. Set up Drupal, CD. This is seriously taking it so long? But why? Oh shoot, this prefer source is making everything prefer from source. That's why it's taking so long. It's cloning PHP stand. Oh, that's got it. Yeah, we got to go. When you do config repositories and you set the path, it will automatically copy it. You don't want to do prefer source because this is cloning every single dependency, which is extremely, extremely slow. All right. I've only got a little bit of time because I'm going to do some family stuff and I have dishes to do. I want to try to see if we can get this output running. Command tester. Press play. I'll stop when we get here. All right. So output format is console. I just want to see output format, output formatters. I guess we'll have to see output formatter collector. Output formatter interface. Oh, JSON. I wonder if we can just have it do that. So I'm going to make one more adjustment. So output format. Okay, so we'll step over the output formatter. We got it. This error and diff collector. So this report. So report error and diff, error 0 file diff. So we have a file diff, but why is it not reporting to us? So this configuration get output file. So is it because we're doing a dry run? So if should show diffs. This report file diffs. So the message, one file with changes. Symfony stuff. So it's writing the line, but why is it returning an error? Because it ran something. But yeah, there's no output. Why? It's silly. Status output 0, output inputs. That's highly annoying. All right. So we've got this, which cloned everything into place. So it locked Drupal Rector. It copied in our settings files. It copied in our samples. We installed Behat we installed our dependencies inside of our package, and we ran. Vendor bin Rector not found, and that's because the test I changed where it assumes that things will run inside of the functional tests. So if I look at features and given a test copy a folder, so it looks like this passed. But this other feature, Rector examples, given I create a test copy, sure. When I run Rector, on so it changes the directory up, which I had changed it to be /Drupal, which means that now you can't run it locally if I were to do that. So So shoot. GitHub workflow, GitHub actions, environment variables. We're going to see something real quick. So environment variables, GitHub workflow, the name of the workflow. Great. So we're going to do if env GitHub workflow, we'll say GitHub workflow equals that. If GitHub workflow is equal to, that should be the name. We're going to say change dir directory to Drupal, else we'll do that. Did I break something? Because everything is okay. So I'm just going to try pushing that up real quick. Handle in specific workflow. Real quick too, let's do this run Rector. We're going to delete this prefer source as well, because it's already going to be copied, and this will make both the tests run faster. So let's push it. There we go. I'm going to remove this command tester because it's not really doing much. It's not helping out exactly. Unless I'm missing something from command tester git. Oh, wow. Well, if I would look at the error output, I bet I would find more. So command tester, so does git display, this output stream, this error output. All right, so we're gonna do that. I'll refresh this. Let's go back to the pull request. So local package run. Oh, look how much faster that is. 36 seconds. Yes. Great. I love it. 36 seconds is nice. That is much faster. And this failed. So that was taking 4 minutes to run. At least now, when it's installing, it took 2 seconds to install everything. So that's cool. But this was still failing, unfortunately. So let's see, setup job, virtual environment, token permissions. Don't know what. So let me just see one thing. View the raw logs. Inside here, we were checking GitHub workflow. It's not going to say anything. I really hate doing stuff like this and committing it, but I'm going to show real quick. You know what? Instead of that, hold on. Instead of that, how about I just update the other test too to match? So I updated this. We want to update this one. So we copy these two. and we'll copy this setup.php. So we have where then we require it. We copy the settings. It makes it, but like, why does it fail? Why does it fail there, but not anywhere else? I'm just so confused by that. So we'll do that there. Okay, that's the only times it moves. We'll commit that. Normalize GitHub flows. I don't know. Let's push. And now I'm going to debug this test again to see what we get in the error output, to see if there's something we can assert. Again, I'm not sure what's going on and why the test is failing, because everything here locally is passing. Test failed. The error output is not available when the tester is run without caps. Oh boy. We got this file here. And then output. Okay, so I guess we need to set true here. We'll do debug. Both are empty. What in the world? But it's still printed. That's it's not supposed to print out. I don't get why it's not capturing the output. That's the whole point of this command tester, is it's supposed to capture it being written. Unless it's because it's not passing error formatter, get by name, this, unless for some reason it's not using the same output and it's just writing it, and that's why. So it can't be captured. So one thing we could try is another trick where we do, what is it? Where we catch the output buffer. We can do I think it's something like that. Just want to see if that gets us the output captured by this being leaked, which it did. Awesome. So we'll say decode Just want to see if that gets us somewhere, because I do need to hop off. I appreciate everybody for hanging out. Again, this is turning out to be a trickier problem than I expected. But we at least get the output, so we can infer from the diff if we want to. What changed? Working, but it's just the test isn't working. So I'm going to hit stop there. I'm going to refresh this again. That passed. So it ran locally. Rector is done. PHP stand done. But again, here, no such file or directory, because it probably just is it probably not parsing that. Let's see. We'll just try that. Although I don't even think that's the right way. I'm gonna try this later. I have to hop off. I wish I knew why this was not working. I'm actually gonna just try that real quick, because I'm pretty sure it's just the level above. Hold on. GitHub com actions environment variables. Let's do home. So home and workspace. So workspace is where we're checked out. So if we just did, how does this get set? Oh, so this just assumes two. Okay. My changes make everything a little bit harder. So yeah, I'm going to come back to this on another day. My next live stream will be Wednesday. I'm pushing it. It's at 2 Central, but I have a training that I'm giving that goes from 10 to 2. So it'll be a little bit later, but I'm going to hopefully get back to this, and maybe we just need manual testing to verify it, because I just don't understand why it's not working. I know why it's not working now, because I changed paths and everything's a little bit broken, which I want to try and get that fixed up. But thanks for tuning in. I'm going to head out and have a good day.